Welcome, and apologies for the audio not showing up. Don't know what happened there. To the monastery. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra. And with me is a newcomer into the temple. Creator of the Moonshine TTRPG, a 1920s noir affair, which we'll be getting into, and it's very interesting 3-die setup. The one and only Benjamin Goldman, which sounds
Hello.
the name
Yeah, it's definitely not true. I'm not even the most well-known Benjamin Goldman, but I'm working on it. I'm the only one that's me.
Yeah, the name itself sounds like it could be out of a detective story.
Sure could.
But I suppose I'll start with the humble beginnings, in a sense. Walk me through your first introduction to role-playing games and what made it stick.
Yeah. So I started on role-playing games with a very not well-known system called the Marvel Universe role-playing game, which is a diceless superhero system.
Oh, that one. I've covered that.
I love it. I genuinely love it. It's an absolute mess. Like, I have so many homebrew rules to fix things, but I love it, and I try and run it whenever I can. But that's where I started.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, when I was like a kid, and then I got into board games pretty heavily. And then sort of in college got back into primarily like Vampire the Masquerade and Pathfinder 1E and 3.5 D&D, the standards, and then went into the board games industry, and then was like, you know what, I want to do tabletop. So I've stepped away from the board game industry and have been trying to sort of totally immerse myself in role-playing games.
Yeah, and I can get that. Now, as far as doing a film noir thing set in the Roaring 20s, what was the inspiration to go that route?
Yeah, I mean, the truth is there's like many good settings for games. I picked this one because I actually think it's a little underserved. The closest one that I can think of that has had, real success is probably Call of Cthulhu. And that one is, I believe, meant to be set more in like during World War One, like in the 1910s. And so I was like, I think this is a really fun setting that's a little underserved in the market. And also, Moonshine is substantially lower fantasy than Call of Cthulhu. So even within that space, I think it, separates itself to be, worth picking up, even if you, and maybe especially if you like Call of Cthulhu.
The vibe I end up getting, as far as the difference, I'd say is the level of fantasy is its own thing, but it's more of, this doesn't strike me as one where horror is the main thing, which is definitely the case with Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah, I agree. It's not. I think it's. I mean, you could do horror in Moonshine, but it's really optimized more for intrigue, mystery, suspense. I would say if you wanted to do like a horror game in Moonshine, psychological thriller would be sort of the genre of horror that I think it would do best.
Yeah. But I think that's why it's important to note that this is a 1920s noir RPG.
Yeah.
Because I feel like a lot of people have heard the term film noir bandied about, but not quite grasped what it means, or or where the genre comes from. And you can help me fill in the blanks if you on this one, but my understanding has always been film noir was born out of a response to to a whole generation coming back after World War One had ended in the late 1910s, and the
Hmm.
mindset that they end up having. Obviously, the noir is rooted in the French word for black, and
Yep.
it started in text form and then evolved into film, the film part of it, as film became more and more of a thing, and going to the movies was more and more of a thing. And
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, film noir itself
mhm,
really didn't become a thing until like the 40s and 50s. Um, at least in film.
mhm.
Um, so I'm sort of like transposing a genre a few decades before it was actually born.
Yeah, but
Um,
it was seeded essentially in the post World War One areas.
yeah, definitely.
And when I went through the preview document that you have, I did get a very strong vibe of the Roaring Twenties kind of setup, and it's very apparent with some of the inspirations you listed in that. Um,
Yeah.
things like Peaky Blinders, things like Boardwalk Empire, um, The Great Gatsby, which I know. I remember when I covered that, and somebody was like, "Aren't you spoiling him?" Like, the book's been available for whole generations. These statutes passed. uh,
Fair enough.
yeah, and we also have the more modern take in the form of neo noir, which is just doing film noir but with a more modern setting.
Yeah, I see. Cyberpunk gets a lot of like very noir things in it often.
Yeah, it can. Uh, I've had whole discussions on how a lot of people misunderstand cyberpunk, but that's that's another story.
Hmm. I mean, I would say Blade Runner is a sort of in essence a noir film.
It very much is in terms of how it's shot, how you do obviously having a character who is a grizzled detective who's seen some stuff
Yeah.
certainly doesn't hurt. And I mean, maybe if I wanted to dig a bit further, I'd do some investigating about whether or not some aspects of that sort of noir detective fiction are a response to westerns going on the downswing.
Yeah.
See if there's similar DNA, because I have a feeling there is. Uh, it's just that if I was to dig that up, I would have to go
You
really
have to go do
into
research.
really in well, especially trying to read like old dime novels and old pulp novels to test that theory.
Yep.
Uh, but I think the shifting away from that a little bit, the next thing I'd want to get into is the die system that you're using.
Yeah.
Putting aside the fact that I appreciate the use of D12 since that is probably the most neglected die in the set. Um, what was the idea of doing this 3D12 only approach to dice rolls?
It's a great question. So, I mean, the D12 was actually from the beginning it was going to be D12s, because 12 is among the best numbers ever, and I really like how D12s roll, and I don't think they get used enough. So that is like genuinely part of the motivation for 12 as the specific size of die.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if I get into the nitty gritty on the math, it also sets ranges in a good way. Um, in tabletop and board games, we sort of are cursed in a way that video games don't have to deal with, which is that we're sort of limited to small integers and very simple like operations. Like you're not going to cube anything or have like a log function in a tabletop game because it would suck. And so 12 is basically with the way the dice worked, it let me have the ranges where I could have like, +1 bonus, +2 bonus matter, but still have larger bonuses for other times. So just set a good threshold of like where that middle ground is going to sit. In terms of the system itself, like I said, I come from a board games background from like design experience, and board games have like a lower tolerance for rules wonk than tabletop role-playing games do. Tabletop role-playing games are often much looser than board games can be, because in board games they're often competitive and you do need like a ruling on everything. You can't have it be like left up to the GM because it's not a thing. And it also, board game mechanics tend to have to be a little bit simpler. Not always. There are some board games that go like crazy hard.
Simpler. He says in a universe where the campaign for North Africa exists.
Yes, but no one plays it, including the people that made it.
Well, the people that made it are out of business. They went out of business a year after the game came out.
Yes. I would say there are, of course, crazy heavy games. But there are also things like Aces and Eights, which is a tabletop role-playing game where if you get shot, you rarely die from the bullet, but rather die from your infection rolls afterwards. And rounds take place every 10th of a second. So, there's extremes in both categories. But so the 3d12, one thing that was really important to me was that every roll works the same. This is in part from watching new people pick up things like D&D and Pathfinder. I know that for people who are experienced, it's hard to go back to this moment when you were new, but you get people a lot being like, which die do I roll? Which die do I roll? And like, now we're like, yeah, it's the 20, unless it's damage, and then it's whatever your damage die is. But legitimately, when new players are learning, they're like, wait, which one am I rolling for this? Because it's actually a lot harder than we give it credit for. We've just learned it. So I wanted every roll to have the exact same rules, no matter what type of roll it is. So you always know you learn this one mechanism for how dice work, and then you do it. So the way the system works is, as long as you have any training in a skill, you roll 3 12-sided dice. If you are a little bit trained, which is on the character sheet is dots. Basically, you can bubble in up to 4. So if you have 1 dot, then you roll the 3d12 and you get rid of your best result, which means the only way to keep it 12 is to roll 2 of them, right? So you're throwing away lots of good dice all the time. If you've got 2 dots, then you are throwing away your middle die, so you keep your high and your low. So like one of the nice things is when you upgrade from 1 to 2, it means you get to keep your 12s now. Like if you roll a 12, you will keep it. The only way to throw away a 12 is to roll more than 1. And then when you get to 3rd dot, you throw away your lowest die. And so what that means is that you really feel the progression, because you always, any roll, you can see what would have been if you had more or less, right? You can say, oh man, if I just had my 3rd dot instead of 2nd, I would have gotten a result that's 7 better, right? Or like, oh man, I'm glad I upgraded that from 1 to 2. I keep this 12 now. So it's really visceral in terms of the progression. You really feel it.
Yeah, and since we're using dots, a lot of people, when they see dots, they're immediately going to think of the Storyteller engine, i.e. World of Darkness, and they're like, yeah, was that a major influence, or was that more of a coincidental thing?
I mean, it's hard to know exactly, right? I played a lot of the White Wolf games. I do like the dot character sheet because it's more visual. You're not just looking at a bunch of numbers. You can more quickly just, from a just visual standpoint, see where your good skills are. So I like the like I like the interface better. So that's definitely influenced because I probably have, just subconsciously looked at vampire sheets or werewolf sheets and just like liked how they functioned better than, like a D&D sheet. So I would say, yeah, almost certainly. I mean, every game I play is going to be to some extent an influence. Obviously, mechanically, it's entirely different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, one of them is a success-based pool, and this is a aim high setup.
Yep. Yeah, it's the sort of your standard. You're either going against a challenge number or it's an opposed roll.
Yeah. And in that same vein, I appreciate having different weapons as their own skills without having the whole skill and specialty thing.
Yeah.
But when it comes to this particular setup, and I know you didn't get into character creation in the preview, but I'm curious if it is a case of you've got X amount of points, have at it, or if there's a bit of segmenting when it comes to point expenditure and how you're getting your first set of dots during character creation.
Yeah, there's a little segmenting. There's not a ton because the amount you spend is a low enough number to not be like crazy overwhelming. So like I've played a system that I love, Eclipse Phase. In the first edition of that, there was no segmenting, and it was just like, here's your character sheet, spend 200 points. And it's like, how do I even, like, as a new player, how do I even begin to do that? So in Moonshine, the segmenting is you have your core attributes. There are 5 packages that you can select. So it's going to be basically a set of numbers, and you can assign those numbers into one of those 4 attributes, however you want. They all add to 12, and the lowest is 2. There's a few different ways that I could have explained how it works. One way that I was really close to using was they all start at 2, and you have 4 points to spend. It's mathematically the same as the 5 possible arrays. Then you have 25 experience to spend on your skills, weapons, psychic abilities, and specialties. And 25 is like manageable. So I didn't feel the need to segment that. And then you can take some flaws, which are like these little like negative character traits that you get a small experience refund for. And then the last bit is standing, which is sort of like a more story element, like what's your fame, how well connected are you, how are you doing financially, and you have 3 dots that you just drop into that. And then experience in the game, you just get experience after sessions, and that gets spent with exactly the same experience rules as character creation, so you don't have to learn a separate system. And then standing cannot be purchased by the player, it has to be awarded by the storyteller.
Yep. And with standing, I definitely get the vibe of some of the advantages that were core in World of Darkness. Contacts, the people you know and how much influence they have, fame, self-explanatory, and wealth used when it comes to getting things. I am curious if with wealth it's on that same principle of you can get something that is at a certain threshold, but you lose 1 dot doing so because you're spending a lot of your resources getting it. Or
that's basically how it functions. It's intended to be pretty loosey-goosey. It's just not the type of game where getting bogged down in accounting is gonna promote the experience. So it's intended to be like, the GM can basically be like, hey, yeah, you can afford that, you're fine, you have the wealth. Or they can be like, you can afford that, but I'm gonna drop you 1 wealth down because it's such a huge purchase for you. But yeah, I definitely don't want, and this is, there's GM guidance, which is in the book that is not in the quick start. basically talking about like, this is not a super like, like tracking inventory super closely or exact wealth is just not necessary, and for most tables is just going to bog things down.
Mhm. So, with that in mind, when it comes, one of the other things I couldn't help but notice is there when it comes to weapons,
Yeah.
there is an emphasis on benefits beyond keeping better dice when it comes to weapons and what you can get out of them.
Yep.
And
sorry, go for it.
I'm curious if that was a case of trying to make each of the weapons unique beyond how much damage they might do.
Yeah, it's definitely like you're talking about the at 3 dots of a weapon, you get like a weapon perk.
Mm-hmm.
That was to try and give the weapons a little bit more flavor, to make them feel more different from each other, like you said. Like otherwise, it's like, okay, there's a few different weapons and they do different amounts of damage, and maybe they do different ranges. One thing that I think is pretty rare to have in systems that for Moonshine I'm really happy about is all weapons have a noise rating. Because it's pretty frequent where like, hey, maybe like knocking this person out or neutralizing them would be useful, but doing so with a loud weapon could actually cause more problems than it's worth. But yeah, the weapon perks is just to give them more differentiated feels. And then it's also important that like the weapon categories are very broad intentionally. So like the rifle category is everything from like a hunting rifle to a sniping rifle and like everything in between. The blackjacks is really sort of anything intended to be as a weapon that's blunt. Improvised is of course like basically anything. I just didn't want to get bogged down in like a huge weapon chart with all the different types of revolvers. It's not where I want the focus to be. It's not a combat simulator.
Mm-hmm.
There are rules for combat, of course, but it's not trying to replace like Dungeons and Dragons. It's not trying to be a 1920s Dungeons and Dragons.
No, that would be because that'd be a terrible idea, and two, it would mean having to do with grid combat, and well, with even there's a certain brain rot when it comes to the whole grid combat question that I think a lot of people end up just taking out of habit more than asking, is it really necessary to do grid combat in this exact same way as it was done for very confined dungeons?
Yeah, I've been seeing zone combat more and more pop up in RPGs where it's like distance based and like ranks rather than actual positions.
Yeah. I look at that as a consequence of the fact that people have been designing their encounters more akin to set pieces.
Yeah, I mean it's basically true in most D&D encounters. You really only move at the start of the encounter to get to where you want to be, and then you sort of have the people who are far away standing still hitting the people in the middle, and the people in the middle have gotten to each other and are hitting each other. I think good D&D encounter designers make it so that positional stuff is more important and force situations where players need to move around, but I think most combats do not have those features.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and something else I couldn't help but notice is when it comes to the flaws. Obviously you have the dot set up to a point with that, but I do have a feeling that that the full flaws list in the full book is going to have that same broadness, not really trying to get down in the minutia of things.
Yeah, definitely. Like there will be guidance on how to add a flaw.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there's a community Discord for Moonshine, which you can find in a variety of places. There's already been one person who's been like, "Hey, I'm making a skipper character, like a sailor, and I want him to be superstitious. How would I make that flaw? And it's, basically, I was like, hey, it's essentially the same as paranoid, but with different triggers. So it would be basically, if one of the things that makes your character superstitious and nervous is happening, you have a -5 penalty until that thing is resolved.
Mm-hmm.
And -5 is sort of the flaw number. Flaws should create situations where you have a -5 penalty to either some or all rolls.
Yeah. Is -5 essentially a baseline?
So the way that successes, like if like how well you've done, the guidance is in 5s. So if you do less than 5, you've done horribly, like you've really, really done a bad job. If you've done between 5 and 10, you have not done great, but it might get simple jobs done. 10 is seen as like fairly average, but not anything to write home about. 15 is when you're starting to cook a little. 20 is you're doing quite well, and then 25 or 30 are like you're doing incredible and almost certainly going to succeed. And then any of the times where there is a table of things like the resilience table, those are in 5s. So basically, in those cases, a 5 knocks you 1 success rank down.
Oh yeah. Now, with that in mind, obviously some like World of Darkness and similar games are known for how unforgiving they can be when it comes to your durability. I mean, the old 7 wounds thing. But even with that, there are ways to mitigate it. Whether it's the fact that you are rolling damage and trying to confirm that damage, or things like soak. In the case of Moonshine, what means would there be to mitigate damage, whether it be through armor or something else?
So I'll say the best way to mitigate damage in Moonshine is to not let it escalate to that point. Characters are fragile. We are, meat and bone and organs, and your character, when you create them, will have between 4 and 8 hit points, always, and they will live their entire lives at that number of hit points. You cannot get more health. And a shopkeeper with a shotgun is a legitimate mortal threat. So the best way to make sure that you don't get shot is to try and not put yourself in that situation in the first place. Now, there are ways to build your character to be more resilient. One way is to have high grit and high stealth, which are the 2 stats which influence how much health you have. Now, the trade-off is you're going to have lower energy, and energy can be used to improve results. 6 is the average health. But then there's also resilience, which is weapon damage is not rolled. Instead, it's just a soak roll. Your weapons do a flat amount of damage based on your character sheet. So you just sort of write that down on the character sheet, and I know that, like, with this character, if I punch someone, it does 4 damage. And then they have the opportunity to reduce that damage with a resilience roll. There's a specialty called tenacity, which just does flat reduction. But part of the guidance in the book is like, hey, in this world, like, people don't want to die. People are not going to fight to the death, aside from very, very rare situations. Say it's a person hired by the mob to assassinate a member of the party. They might have a worse time going back to the mob empty-handed and just choose to try to fight. But most of the time, if someone gets shot once, they're going to try and find a way out of that situation. So that's another mitigating factor, is that people generally are pretty happy if a gun is pointed at them to find a way to not have that happen.
And I can see that. And you brought it up earlier when it comes to energy, and from what I'm seeing, energy is somewhat analogous to a lot of extra effort systems, whether it be willpower in World of Darkness, Edge in Shadowrun, Moxie in Eclipse Phase. Um,
Yeah.
it can be used for either that or as fuel for psychic effects.
Yeah, that's sort of the key difference, actually, is that it is both your pool for improving rolls, but then for psychic characters, they also need to try and conserve some of that for using their abilities.
Yeah, and it definitely seems as well that regardless, you do have to roll um, your when it comes to doing your psychic effects.
Yeah, it depends. So if you're trying to use hypnotism or suggestion or read minds, those three, yes, you almost always are making a roll. For psychometry, which is where you can touch an object and see its past, I'll say very rarely does an object attempt to resist psychic intrusion. Same with medium, unless the ghost is trying to hide for some reason, it's not going to resist being seen.
Mm-hmm.
So it sort of depends on the psychic ability. It's also true that in the setting, most people are not believers in sort of the supernatural. A minority are, and people who don't believe are generally more vulnerable to it because they're not trying to protect themselves. So the fact of the matter is that if you are a psychic and you're trying to get into the head of someone who doesn't believe that psychics are real, it's generally very easy and you'll almost always succeed.
And would becoming a psychic just be assigning dots that you're getting from skills at character creation into the psychic skills?
Yeah, you just buy the psychic skills, and even later, I could see a GM being like, I need justification on why your character is suddenly unlocking psychic potential, but there's nothing in the rules that prevents you from being like, oh, I think I'm going to take 1 dot of suggestion now, spending your 3 experience to do that.
Yeah. And obviously, this is doing the XP as currency thing. I think that was always in the cards. But when it comes to flaws, are there means that one could work off flaws or switch them out with other flaws?
There is not explicitly any system for that, but I think there absolutely could be. In fact, I probably should write in explicitly that that's a thing that can happen, because that's a thing that does happen. People grow out of, certain vices and will fall into other ones. In terms of like how that works experience-wise, I don't know if you, if you lose a flaw, I don't know if you lose 2 experience as well. That's like part of why I have tried to leave it alone, because I don't want too many like nitty-gritty edge case rules. So for now, sort of the flaws are the flaws, but certainly if I were the storyteller and a player was like, hey, I want this thing where my character who has this fear, let's say, a fear of dogs, I want them to, grow out of that. And I could say, I would work with that player to find a way to make that happen.
Yeah. So when it comes to the encounter side of things, given what you've been saying about trying to streamline the process, I'm guessing that we're not dealing with a case where NPCs are made the exact same way as PCs, or are we?
No, we are. Yeah, it's exactly the same. Yep, they function by the exact same rules. The book has a large NPC codex, and you don't need to learn different rules for how NPCs work. They function exactly the same as player characters.
Yeah. There was a bit of a habit of that in the early 2000s, but doing so with character systems that were significantly more complex. So I will pivot to asking, when it comes to when the GM is making those kind of characters, is there kind of a suggested amount of dots for ones who want to make ones that are on a higher end of the threat of the bell curve?
Yes. So standard character creation is 25 XP. I think the highest experienced character in the codex is 80. And this is for like a psychic cult leader, so has like very psychic abilities are the most expensive experience wise of anything. So, you know, a character with multiple high ranking psychic abilities is going to be a very expensive one. So yeah, there's guidance on like, hey, this is like how you know, how much experience you should be using for NPCs. There's also guidance that like, hey, if this is not a super important NPC that you need to stat out, just give them 1 dot in everything and 3 in all their attributes. And then just do it. Just that's like sort of your average, you know, situation is they have that. They don't have any specialties, no psychic abilities, just 1 dot in all the skills and a 3.
I suppose that's how you would do your mooks, your goons.
Yeah, you could either do that or pull, you know, the criminal stat block from the NPC codex.
Yeah, and what I will note that I always try and parallel between video games as much as tabletop, as much as it makes me a maverick in some circles at times. I know it'd be easy to bring up the Mafia games, especially with the Old Country having released a few weeks ago, but I feel like another one that might be a good parallel for this, even though only 1 episode is out right now, is Fallen Aces.
I'm not familiar with it, but I should definitely check it out.
Fallen Aces is an immersive sim kind of first-person affair. One that is in the New Blood umbrella. And it is very much trying to go for that 1920s crime fiction.
Yeah. It looks like it might be a bit of a shmup. Like when I'm going through the images of it, almost all of them show the first person of the character holding a weapon of some kind.
It's immersive sim is in about the same level as something like Thief or System Shock.
Okay.
You definitely have that aspect, but there's a lot more interactivity with a lot of other things, so it's not strictly that. And you know, in a game like Thief, even if it is in first person and you do have the bow, the last thing you want to do is get in combat because you're going to be overwhelmed very fast, and you are very squishy because you're a thief.
Yeah, it does. It looks cool. And yeah, I think there's just like a hunger for the genre, and I think right now I do like Call of Cthulhu. I think Call of Cthulhu right now is when people want to play this genre in tabletop RPGs, they often sort of try to adapt Call of Cthulhu for it. And so
sometimes that's a round peg in a square hole.
Yeah. But you know, I think Moonshine offers one. I think it's simpler than Call of Cthulhu in a lot of ways, especially character creation. Character creation in Call of Cthulhu, I think, is actually kind of messy in a way that rubs me the wrong way. Like Moonshine character creation is a whole lot more straightforward and fast.
If you were to time it, how long would you say it would take somebody to make a starting character in Moonshine? Maybe 20
So
minutes?
I recorded I recorded a video of me making a character, actually making myself, because that was what the Discord wanted me to do. And I recorded both making the character and explaining my choices and explaining character creation. And the video that I made is 12 minutes long. So if it's an experienced person making a character, 5 minutes. A new player who's reading the book, making their first character, no more than half an hour. So fast. Like if I need to whip up, you know, a NPC that I didn't expect the party to get to that quickly, I can just say, hey, 5-minute break. And when they get back, I'll have that NPC and, other NPCs relevant to that person that might show up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can get that. I suppose it would. I suppose if well, let me rephrase what I was gonna say. It's some games that do the experience budget approach. Sometimes you'll see a sidebar of if you want to do a bit higher of a floor. Do you have anything like that? If you want to do some more advanced characters right out the gate, here's what the XP budget would be.
Absolutely. One of the things I've done that was a ton of fun was I was like, I could run a Batman like game in Moonshine, right? And so I was like, I'm just gonna fill out a character sheet to make Batman. And I'm not gonna count the experience until the end, just to see. And that was a 150 experience build. Yeah. So like you could absolutely be like, yeah, we're gonna do like a superhero, like a noir superhero game, and everyone has 50 experience to work with. I don't think that will be a suggestion in the book because that would be overwhelming for new players. But yeah, it will say like, hey, if you want to play like less, characters who are less experienced, you could build at 20. I don't think I would suggest lower than that. And if you want to play characters who are already established and well known and very talented at what they do, then start at 40.
Although if I'm being honest, given the setting and the subject matter, Batman wouldn't be my first choice. My first choice would be the Shadow.
Sure. Or what's his name? Something Heel Jack.
Yeah, Spring Heel Jack.
Spring Heel Jack, yes.
Or maybe Doc Savage if you want to stretch it.
Yeah. But yeah, I think doing like a noir-esque superhero game at some point would be a lot of fun with it. But yeah, it's 25 works very well. It is enough that people have been able to build at least the start of the vision for the character, where they've this is who I want them to be, and I can see it at 25 experience, and I can see where the room to grow is as well. So that's sort of how 25 got settled on, was by just having people build characters blind, like without an experience budget, trying to get to their vision, and then sort of pulling it back a little bit because we want people to, feel the progression and have the fun of getting to sort of the total fantasy of the character.
And what are you shooting for as far as a page count?
Yeah, so that's a good question. The core book is going to be a combination of two things. That is the Moonshine Player's Handbook, which is probably going to be around 120 pages, give or take, probably slightly shorter. And then it is also going to include the City Guide to Chicago, which is going to be probably around 80 pages as well. So probably around a 200-page book in total. And the City Guide to Chicago, it has guidance on how to run a game in Chicago. And basically, the different city guides are going to have different feels for the cities, and that's going to be expressed in the guide. So like for Chicago, it's going to be very mob, very corruption, like the mafia is basically a wing of the government. The city guide to New Orleans has such a powerful fantasy, they have a supernatural edge to the city already. And because of that, psychics are able to hide there better, and are able to actually form community. So it's a very supernatural, psychic heavy city. And in most places, if psychics get too loud, the U.S. federal government is going to send some feds to scoop them up and militarize them. Because there is actually a psychic community who can train and learn in New Orleans, in that city, sort of the government is watching it, but not bold enough to actually try and kidnap people out of that tight-knit community. And then like Atlantic City is like city of vice and hedonism. So the Chicago guide is going to be printed with the book, and then for people who do back the Kickstarter, they're going to get New Orleans, they're going to get Atlantic City, and then we did, over the first half of the Kickstarter, a vote where we narrowed down 16 cities down to just one over the first few weeks, and the backers landed on San Francisco. And then right now, the Kickstarter is at 92% with 60 hours to go. So it's going to fund. I'm not worried about that. But there are some stretch goals. So Los Angeles, New York, Washington, D.C., Detroit, and Toronto are sort of the city guide stretch goals. So if all those get unlocked, that's, 9 different fully built out cities. And those include NPCs specific to that city that are built out with stories and history. It includes locations that also have a little more meat on their bones, that are either some are fictional. They're going to be like Chicago has a fictional speakeasy called the Evening Underground, but it also has Wrigley Field, which is, I've heard, not fictional. And then each one also includes 2 ready to run, like one-shot mysteries. So if they all get unlocked, that's 18 ready to run adventures in the campaign. I don't know if they will all get unlocked. I think we'd have to have some things go our way. But fingers crossed that they do.
Yeah, I can certainly go with that. Now, with that said, what are you shooting for as far as a release window? Not a hard date per se, but a ballpark.
Yeah. The City Guide to Chicago and the core book are going to be digitally released to backers in December. Then there will be another City Guide released every 3 months digitally after that, until we've done them all. So, if that's 9 of them, then we're looking at like a new City Guide every 3 months for, like 2.5 years. If we're, and then the physical book, it can go to print whenever the digital one is ready and we have our printer lined up and set to go. For that one, I don't know exactly when the distribution will happen, but I have conservatively put it at March. So 3 months after the digital files are released. I think they will show up earlier than that, but I would rather under promise and over deliver.
Oh yeah. And I'll certainly be keeping an eye out on how things develop with that. Might be a bit of local bias, but I'm pretty sure it would only be a matter of time before I try and convert it into my neck of the woods.
Yeah. I think the closest to you was Milwaukee was one of the available cities. For the vote. It didn't get voted on, I think in part because it sounded really nice in the 1920s. Like every other city was like, had all this awful stuff, corruption and crime. And when I looked up Milwaukee in the 20s, it was like run by a socialist party and was very low corruption and people were happy and things were good. And like it's like, it sounds great. It doesn't necessarily sound like a compelling setting for a noir crime game.
No, you should have used the Twin Cities, because there was a lot of fighting going on between Minneapolis and St. Paul. A lot of fighting, even to the point of that being one of the many reasons the Minneapolis Lakers got ran out and moved to Los Angeles,
where their name makes no sense.
Yeah, they started in Minneapolis because especially thanks to the influence of Sid Hartman, who was pushing really hard to get a basketball team in Minnesota. The problem was this has always been the dynamic. A lot of the economic stuff happens in Minneapolis, but St. Paul is the capital.
Yeah.
And because of that and the proximity, I mean, they are the only thing separating the two is the Mississippi River. And since we have bridges over that, that's moot. Fights between folks from Minneapolis and St. Paul were common. Not so much nowadays, but there's snipes here.
It's like if St. Louis and Chicago were right next to each other.
Yeah, even to the point of having two separate newspapers simply because both sides didn't want to play nice with each other.
Yeah. I mean, the city guides will have this guidance on them of like, probably the city guide to Chicago could be mostly used to run a game in the Twin Cities. Obviously don't put Wrigley Field there. But like the type of story told in that, a Midwestern city on the Great Lakes is going to work for most Midwestern cities on the Great Lakes. In fact, one of the things that Kickstarter backers get is another one-shot adventure set in Chicago, but of course could be in any Great Lake city, where some people turn up washed on the shore of Lake Michigan with puncture wounds in their arm and drained of blood, and local newspapers, especially the less reputable ones, start running stories that a vampire has moved into the city. And it is a mystery on sort of digging into what's actually going on there.
Yeah. But that's something to certainly keep an eye out for. But with that said, I do want to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come all the way to my monastery and enjoy the madness that happens here.
Absolutely.
And
thank you for having me.
Anytime you see fit to return, the door is always open. As
I appreciate it.
I often say around here, drinking is not mandatory, but it is encouraged.
Fitting for Moonshine.
And, of course, a sincere thanks goes out to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come onto the show and enjoy the madness. And there'll be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here, on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.